I should have been a cowboy. I should have learned to rope and ride. Wearing my 6-shoe, riding my pony on a cattle drive. Oh, I should have been a cowboy.
Entering the 2011 season, Oklahoma State knew that in order to win the Big 12, at least 3 things had to happen. Number 1, their offensive money players had to come through, like quarterback Brandon Weeden, running back Joseph Randall, as well as wide receiver Justin Blackman and others. Checkmark, mission accomplished. Number 2, they knew that their defense would have to come through with big plays. Well, how about leading the country in both takeaways and turnover margin? Checkmark, mission accomplished. And number 3, at the end of the year, they knew they were going to have to beat Oklahoma. Checkmark, mission accomplished. They won the game 44-10. A 12-1 record, best in school history. Number 3 ranking at the end of the year, best in school history as far as finishing the season. Winning a BCS Bowl by defeating Stanford. For Oklahoma State, it was a magical year. During the offseason, Oklahoma State rewarded Mike Gundy with a contract extension, which will now pay him $3.5 million per year, substantially more than what he was making previously. A lot of Oklahoma State fans want to know what their team is going to do for an encore. Can they do it again? Can they win another Big 12 championship? Over time, that's possible because they've been getting terrific recruiting classes, and we've documented on these shows in the past how much their facilities have improved. This year, however, as far as winning a Big 12 championship, the odds are going to be long. You got to replace the quarterback. You got to replace several receivers. You got to replace several linemen and your 2 best pass rushers in Rashedi Jones and Jamie Blacknick. So it is asking an awful lot for Oklahoma State to go 11-1 again. Not that it's impossible, but not very likely. But to make no doubt about it, Oklahoma State still has enough talent on both sides of the ball to where they could still have a pretty good season. They'll still be good. All right, key number 1, no question, it's going to be the quarterback. Wes Lunt is a true freshman, about 10 years younger than Brandon Weeden, who played at OSU last season. Of course, had a fantastic year and, of course, led Oklahoma State to a Big 12 championship and was a first-round overall pick by the Cleveland Browns. Wes Lunt, true freshman coming out of Illinois, a 2-time state champion there. But the one thing, even though he's a true freshman, that Mike Gundy, offensive coordinator Todd Monken saw in Lunt must be something pretty darn good for him to be ahead in the depth chart over 2 guys who were already there. J.W. Walsh, as well as Clint Shelf. In the case of Shelf, he's been there, I think, a couple of years longer than Lunt. Let's face it, Lunt this season is going to get thrown right into the fire. Did have a nice spring game, but it will be a whole nother experience when he's playing in front of 65,000 fans at home at T. Boone Pickens and some road games this year in which the crowd capacities could be larger. He's going to have some successes, okay? But he's also going to have some down moments as well. That's what true freshmen will go through. And to be fair also to Lunt, the offensive line that Weeden had last year was a lot more experienced than this one, and the weapons that Lunt will be throwing to aren't quite as talented as the ones that Weeden had. So you have to look at it pretty objectively. But over time, barring injury, I think the Oklahoma State coaching staff feels that Lunt will be a long-term answer. Not this season necessarily, but with the experience he'll gain this year, it'll only make him better. So I think in the case of Wes Lunt, expect some ups and expect some downs from him. The running game for Oklahoma State should be nothing but ups, way ups, because they've got terrific 1-2 punch. talking about Joseph Randle, an all Big 12 selection from last season, and in my opinion, the best running back in the Big 12 entering this year. Scored a plethora of touchdowns, gained a lot of yards, and he comes back for another season, along with Jeremy Smith, one of the more underappreciated running backs you're going to find in this league. Smith last year did a real number on Texas in that ball game in Austin a year ago, breaking off some big runs for TDs, showing his overall speed. And that was, by the way, against the #1 defense in the league last year. So you can't rest on Smith. And, of course, Joseph Randle, best running back in the Big 12, in my opinion. Now, to me, key number 2 is going to be the wideouts. And it's not just because you lose Justin Blackman. That's obvious. He was a 2-time Biletnikoff Award winner, nation's top receiver, and the #1 first-round draft pick by the Jacksonville Jaguars. It was one of the top 10 picks in last year's draft. But you also lost Josh Cooper. Cooper was a serviceable wide receiver and a special teams player. He's going to be missed as well. You're not going to have Michael Harrison either. He got kicked off the team. So right there, you're without at least 3 receivers from a year ago. That means you're going to be looking for more, as in Tracy Moore and Charlie Moore. Tracy Moore is your leading receiver coming back this year. He had 45 receptions. And Charlie Moore, if the spring game is any indication, then Charlie Moore should fit in just fine with the Cowboys. Played well in the past spring game, but we'll see if that translates into real games. Isaiah Anderson saw action last season, had a nice game against Kansas State. He comes back along with John Stewart, and you also have back Blake Jackson. Blake Jackson, by the way, is a junior college transfer. I want to stress that. So you do have some capable receivers. They're just not as experienced as the ones that Oklahoma State had last season. Just like the wide receivers, this is not an area of great experience for Oklahoma State. Talking about the offensive line. We'll begin with the guards, though. Lane Taylor, who did start a little bit last season, but his starts were at the end of the year. So we'll see how he does being a permanent starter at right guard. The other guard is going to be Jonathan Rush, who was limited last season because of a knee injury, but he is back for a 6th year. He got a medical hardship year, so that's good for Oklahoma State. At the center position, Grant Gardner was a good one last year, but he's moved on, so now Evan Epstein takes over at the center slot for the Pokes. And at the tackle positions, at right tackle, Parker Graham takes over for Levi Atcock. And at the other tackle position, they thought it was going to be Michael Bowie, but he's no longer on the team, so they're going to go with Devin Parks, a redshirt freshman. So at the left tackle position, you're going to have a freshman blocking for a freshman quarterback. First 3 games, you probably won't really notice much of a difference. But when they play Texas in that Big 12 opener in late September and going against those terrific defensive ends, it might make a big difference because you're going against Okafor, you're going against Jeff Coate, and that matchup, at least right now in August, doesn't look favorable at all. So we'll see how well Parks develops in that left tackle slot for Oklahoma State. And at tight end, you have Blake Jackson. So for Oklahoma State, they've got some good pieces coming back, but right now, you have to say that there's a lot of inexperience on that side of the ball. All right, key number 3 for Oklahoma State, in my opinion, is going to be pass rush. Look, last season, a big reason why the Cowboys were able to force so many turnovers was because they got to the quarterback on a consistent basis. Quarterback has to throw it earlier than he would like, and you force the quarterback into mistakes. That's where the linebackers, along with the defensive backs, work with the defensive line hand in hand. It's all one unit. But you have to replace 2 members of that unit from a year ago. Along with the defensive tackles, and that will be David Dale Collins as well as Anthony Rogers. The play of these 4 guys, in my opinion, will dictate if Oklahoma State can come close to what they did last year in terms of takeaways. I think they're going to get their share of takeaways. I think 44 is highly unlikely because that was such a large number. But if these 4 guys up front can get the job done, look for Oklahoma State again to have a high takeaway margin. And that's really what they specialized in a year ago. The linebacking core for Oklahoma State, this is an area, I don't know if they've ever been as experienced in this area as they are entering this year. All three come back. Sean Lewis, starting in his third year at one linebacker, has a lot of speed. A guy who made 90 tackles a year ago for the Cowboys, Alex Elkins, he comes back, along with Caleb Levy, who had 74 tackles. So you got guys who can stick to you. A lot of experience in those three linebackers. The secondary has a lot of experience too. 3 of their 4 defensive backs return. That includes both corners in Broderick Brown, who could be all Big 12 at the end of the year, along with Justin Gilbert at the other corner. And at one safety, you'll have Daquan Lewis, who last season had 93 tackles. He's a leading tackler coming back for the Pokes. You do have to replace an all Big 12 strong safety, though, in Markel Martin, and that will be the big spot right there. And right now they've got several guys vying for that one position. If you're looking at the special teams, they're in pretty good hands as far as punting and place kicking. One of the best in both departments comes back in the form of Quinn Sharp. Sharp last season had an incredible punting average, and last season did a fantastic job in place kicking. So you have his leg to rely on. And as far as returning, we already talked about it earlier, Justin Gilbert handling the punt return duties. But the Cowboys do have to do a little bit better job in covering kicks. And one rule change that will help this year is the fact that the ball will now be placed at the 35-yard line on kickoffs. So they may not have to really rely on the kick team to cover kicks, because Quinn Sharp should be able to boot that ball out of the end zone all the time, and that should lead to a lot of touchbacks. We'll see if that, in fact, will become reality, though. If you're looking at the schedule for Oklahoma State, it really plays very well, especially at the beginning of the season. Savannah State at home is your opener. You go to Arizona, second game of the year, new head coach at Rich Rodriguez at the Wildcats, but this is a team that struggled last year, and I think it's going to take them some time to adapt to Rich Rodriguez's offense. So I think you're catching Arizona at a terrific time. Second game of the year. It's a road game, but it should still be a win for the Cowboys. And then you host Louisiana the following week. You get a week off before you play the Texas Longhorns. Longhorns will also have a week off before that game as well. And that's the game that could really determine how far Oklahoma State will go this year. The games in Stillwater, Oklahoma State has won the last 2 meetings, but those games were in Austin, and Oklahoma State has never beaten Texas at home when Mack Brown has been the head coach for the Longhorns. So that's a little history working against the Cowboys there. We'll see how the freshman quarterback in Lunt handles that terrific Texas defense. The next week, you'll play at Kansas, should be a win, and you host Iowa State, the only team that beat Oklahoma State a year ago. Entering the second half of the season, TCU, you get them at home in late October, and then the following week at Kansas State, that'll be a tough game, and then the next week hosting West Virginia. Then the last 3 games at home against Texas Tech, I can't see Tech winning that game, and then you play at Oklahoma and at Baylor to close out the season. So the Oklahoma State Cowboys schedule, I don't think it works that terribly at all. In fact, they get 5 of their 9 conference games at home, and you should be able to start 3-0 entering the Texas game. Offensively, Oklahoma State should do fine on the ground game, and I think there will be times, as I mentioned earlier, where Lunt will do well, but against the good defenses, it could be a struggle. And again, remember, you're not quite as experienced as receiver as you have been in the past. And defensively, they have to prove that they have some good pass rushers. Otherwise, the team still will be able to force turnovers, but not near as many. I'll look for the Cowboys to have a 9-3 season, and I look for them to finish 4th in the Big 12 and to get a bid into the Alamo Bowl. 2013, in my opinion, is where Oklahoma State should get right back into the thick of things as far as being at the top or near the top of the Big 12 standings. That's my look at Oklahoma State. My next preview, we'll head to the Little Apple and talk about another team that had double digits of wins last season. That was the Kansas State Wildcats. We'll talk about K-State on my next preview. See you next time.